triads are probably the most important thing I have ever learned in terms of knowing how to control harmony on the fretboard. So basically, where do you start with them? You know, I think a great place to start in regards to being inspired by triads is asking yourself whenever you hear something that you like, ooh, how can that be a triad? Okay? So if it's more jazz, so you can ask, let's say you're playing jazz, right? And you hear something like, that wasn't really jazz, more fusion, right? But you can ask, okay, what was the chord, first of all? You're just listening to the recording and going like, oh, it sounds like the bass player is playing the C. What is the chord? Oh, it's like a C major. Oh, okay, I can hear it's a major chord, right? So you go to just a basic C major you might know, and then you play that phrase as associated. You associate that phrase to the chord. And now you ask, okay, so C major, what are the notes of that chord? C, E, and G. Okay, so you play them. You just play the notes. If you don't know the notes on the fretboard, you gotta do stuff that make you know those notes. And I have a bunch of those on this channel, so make sure to subscribe, like, and stick around. But basically, you just play that a bunch of times, and then when you play that phrase, so you listen carefully and transcribe it, you ask, oh, that's interesting. What kind of dance did this phrase just create around that triad? So whenever you see a triad, you know how to kind of do the same dance, right? So that can be just like, oh, okay, so kind of like sliding back and forth, kind of like into the third, through the two, and back, kind of like a scalar motion, as if kind of, chords and scales are connected, right? They want to complement each other. Okay, so what is this? Like, that's kind of like a major 7 to a third here. So interesting, just a second ago you thought you were listening to a phrase, but now you're listening with a new idea of associating that to a triad. So, really, really cool, right? And now you can do that, basically you can take that melodic DNA and put it on another chord. So let's say your song has an F now, even if it's second inversion, doesn't matter. You take that kind of dance of going up, right, into a chord tone, and then going below and above and into the chord tone, and you create that into your next chord tone. You see? Now you have the same movement into another chord. Why is that so good? Because you're learning how to get so much more out of each lick or phrase that you learn by doing that, right? Let's take another example, but these are good. Let's say you're listening more to jazzy or bebop stuff or whatever, has chromatic some materials, right? And if you've been sticking around to this channel, you might have been hearing me talk a lot about that stuff, but I think it's very important to repeat that until it becomes very intuitive for you. For example, you're listening to whatever, and you hear this phrase, right? Very common, bebopy, some might say gypsy, whatever. Okay, so you're listening and you're recognizing that the chord is C. And now you dig it. So you figure out the chord just listening to the bass, or maybe figuring out the chord. And okay, interesting. So I hear it's C, right? Even if you don't know these fancy 6/9 voicings, it's C. Okay. Oh, I can play C as a triad, right? I can play that as an arpeggio. So what is that? Like, how is this C? You see, now you're not asking a random question of like, what is that? You're asking, how is this C? I just heard a phrase, I liked that phrase, how is that phrase C? And that can be almost anything. Basically, 99% of the stuff you hear is based around chord tones, even if it's a long dance. So, you play the notes of the triad and you recognize the dance. Oh, okay, that That's an interesting dance around my chord tone, just like a little half-step trill. And then, oh, okay, I'm approaching with 2 notes into my next chord tone, the 5. Oh, what is that? So I went above and 2 below, and I landed on my chord tone. And what is this? From a chord tone to a chord tone. Third goes to the root, E into C. And then all of a sudden, a complicated phrase like this can be summed up as just the chord tones with specific dances. So now you just transcribe the concept, a dance, that you can apply now to another chord, right? That's how you get the style going. If you learn, let's take F again, and you just played this. Okay, so do that also to one of the chord tones of F. And 2 notes approach, no problem. Here's a chord tone of F, right? This F. Interesting. What about this? Okay, so that's interesting. So I have 1, 2, 3 extra notes until landing on a chord tone. No problem. Or exactly like we did here, that will be. Okay, you can mess around with that, but you get the general idea. That's how you start feeling more confident about this stuff. That's how you get out of the darkness, on the fretboard darkness of, oh, what is going on? I don't get it, okay? There's lots of different stuff you can do to tweak it and make it stronger as you go. But just to get out of like the I can't do it kind of thinking about jazz or stuff like that, or phrasing, you can. You can, because the stuff I'm going to show you is all based on the fundamentals. And if you want a very, 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 very step-by-step way to go about it, which has helped thousands of guitar players all over the world, you are invited to check out my website, weissguitar.com. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson.